We've hit a point, I think, where the optimism around AGI is meeting the cold water of reality.
Yep.
We're not going to get there tomorrow or next year. We're getting to very intelligent, very capable models, but the performance of them is good enough. And I think it's time to be focusing entirely on the application layer of what these new shovels let us build. These models are capable of these things with the right teams, the right operating models. It's not a waiting game anymore for investment.
So welcome back to Class Act, the podcast, where we cut through the hype and focus on what actually matters for leaders navigating AI right now. Because let's face it, very few conversations actually help leaders understand what they should be focusing on. Today's guest is someone who's lived the evolution from the inside. Richard Bownes is the head of AI solutions at Vector 8, with a track record of leading AI and data strategy across Europe and delivering large-scale Gen AI and agent-based systems. By the end of today's episode, you'll understand why the current pace of LLM progress is changing, how enterprise adopt AI, how layers from models to agent skills are reshaping day-to-day work, and why infrastructure like MCP may be what finally makes AI scalable. And again, as always, if you're watching on YouTube, Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to subscribe. This helps us reach leaders and continue these conversations. Well, that was an introduction, Richard. Welcome to the podcast. Really good to have you here. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me. Yeah, looking forward to this chat as well. I think it's been an exciting year. The pace of everything has stayed parabolic. So it's nice to talk about what pushes the needle, what people actually care about, what people are buying right now, where you're actually seeing change.
Brilliant. Definitely. So to set the scene, Richard, when most people talk about AI progress, they focus on capability leaps, but you've observed something different happening. What's the real story with LLM development right now?
There's been a myopic focus on things like evals and benchmarks. So all the performance-based metrics, when OpenAI, Google, Anthropic release a new model, it's always state-of-the-art. And the viewpoint is that the latest and greatest is the best because those benchmarks are the highest. But I think that there's an underlying consistency that we're seeing with the advancement in the performance of these models that's more important. So famously, the launch of GPT-5 in November of last year was underwhelming for some because it didn't just smack through all those benchmarks. It was quite an important release because I think we started to see a plateauing of performance, but an increase in consistency of use. So when we're putting these language models in operation, in systems, there's always had to be like a task relevant maturity conversation on, is this an appropriate technology? Can you expect it to perform the way you think? If we scope the task that it's doing in such a way that we can predict it's going to work right?
Yep.
And the band of responsibilities you can start to hand these models, I think, is getting wider, and it's enabling a deeper application layer to be built because you can be less prescriptive with them. You can assume they can handle more, and you can get more reliable outputs from them every time.
Brilliant. And do you think, we talk about the kind of slowing pace as well, do you think the slowing pace of capability gains is actually a feature, not a bug for enterprise adoption?
Yeah, it is. Enterprises are risk averse. And so that consistency is something I think which is attractive. Auditability and governance and observability are already challenging, but when the behavior of these things feels more stochastic than anything else, then having that predictability on performance, or at least on how it's going to respond, even if it's hard to actually measure what that performance is, quite comforting. And I think it's also shifted the focus because things are slowing a little bit with the development of new language models and architectures. It shifted the attention back towards the application layer. So people are waiting less for the next model. They're trying to build more on what is around. I think it's a healthy position for the market, generally speaking, because we're not all waiting for AGI to solve all the problems at once. We're not like using the tools that we have to solve today's problems rather than waiting for tomorrow's tools to solve all the problems.
Through speaking to you before, you've made the distinction between brilliant but unstable and reliable and predictable. Why does that shift matter so much for organizations trying to put AI into production?
I think when you're talking to a chatbot for your insurance company, or you're getting car support or something like that, and I think you're trying to automate human operations, and it's easy to predict how someone might do a job on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday if they did it the same last week. And I think that the ability for these models to perform within harnesses and within frameworks and to specific tasks more reliably is making it easier to adopt solutions which are AI under the surface or agentic under the surface, because that confidence in the way they're going to perform, I think, is becoming higher. So whether it's in like marketing, advertising, and image generation, I think is a really good one. If you've ever played around with some of those image generation tools and you give it one prompt twice, the outcome might be marginally the same content, but contextually extremely different images. And I think if we're able to prompt less and get more consistent, more usable outputs, and that's really meaningful for production workloads, because you can't have so much deviation when it comes to scaled solutions. Like way back in the day, we had 6 Sigma confidence on things, and we're not approaching that with these systems right now, but we're getting towards a place where we can lean on them to solve problems at greater than like POC MVP scale.
100%. And when you look at models like Claude 3.5 versus 4.5 or the broader industry trend, what's actually changing in how these systems behave, and why does consistency enable things that raw capability couldn't?
So I think this is a great example.
Yeah.
I think about a year ago, using Claude 3.5, you could get, with a lot of careful direction and a lot of careful prompting, really astounding outputs. Better code than I can write, better code than a lot of people listening to this will probably be able to. But you had to put a lot of work in, and the effort in versus the output is changing. So now Claude 4.5 Opus is their sort of Anthropic's top of the line coding model, and within tools like Claude Code, or if you use the API through other tools, we're having to do a lot less work. So we're seeing, to get the same level of output, the prompt is no longer this massive BMAD templated architected project with heuristics and ways to validate itself. It's now much more directly the output that I want to see look like X. Please, can I have X? And most of the time we seem to be getting something really close to that from one-shot things. And when it comes to more sophisticated systems or more like application-sized outputs that we're expecting, these harnesses are able to take a lot of work autonomously away with much less input from the user. So how we're seeing that is really cool. There's two sides. One, the models are improving. They're improving not because the architecture is significantly more sophisticated than last year or because they are smarter, but they're getting better because we're treating the data with more care that trains them. So there's like kind of two phases you can think about to making these LLMs. There's like supervised training beforehand, then there's the scaled inference post-training. So you hear about like RLHF, that kind of stuff that comes like after the model's trained, you retrain on domains. And we're getting better at both of these. So across all the big hyperscalers and all the big like frontier labs, the thing that they've really improved over the last year is how they are creating domain-specific data, how they're doing specific bits of training and fine-tuning. And we're seeing that in the domain specificity of these models. Then we combine that with these harnesses like Claude Code, Open Code, Gemini CLI, anti-gravity, Codex. There's a million versions of it. Mm-hmm. What they're really good at doing is scaffolding the work that these models do. And so between those two things, like a raw call to Claude 3.5 a year ago, please make me a front-end app that looks really pretty.
Yep.
You'd get something back and maybe you could click it. And now you can actually get like maybe not a production app off that same thing, but you'll get something that works and probably has some function and probably looks like an engineer made it.
Yeah.
So the vibe coding thing was maybe a bit tongue-in-cheek when it first happened, but it's feeling more and more like a real phenomenon.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's frightening how fast things are moving. It's quite scary.
Yeah, it's really cool.
But you do look at the consistency improvement. Is this improvement like trickling down to smaller models too? What does that mean for cost and accessibility?
We are seeing it. So the best small open weight models of today are about as good as things were a year ago, but they're significantly smaller. Like you can run them on the computer you have in front of you there, the computer that I'm talking to you from. You can now run models which are powerful enough to be useful for things. People are doing all kinds of startup ideas, home labs, personal automations, personal knowledge retrieval applications off of models they run on laptops or Raspberry Pis or small home servers rather than having to reach out to the cloud for it. In terms of the cost, that means that for a consumer, like you don't have to pay subscriptions, you don't have to pay enterprise licenses, you don't have to pay on token consumption. You've got a one-off cost and that you can host your own solutions. It also enables stuff like compute at the edge. A desktop is at the edge, technically kind of marginal if it is or not, but we're seeing language models that are capable on phones. And I think it's not too far in the future that we're going to see them on smaller devices, even than that, doing maybe networking work, or I can see applications in healthcare being unlocked in hand devices in the Amazon basin and stuff like that, with people out in the wilderness without internet capability, without connectivity to the rest of the world, being able to use applications based off this technology without that sort of massive scale infrastructure available in any way, shape, or form.
Well, that's unreal and exciting to think that it could really be accessible for people who really need it as well, and not just the general public. Amazing. Yeah, really good.
Yeah, it's like the internet, right? The internet got information in everybody's hands, and early projects with like balloon satellites and stuff to get access to the internet. It unlocked the greatest hoard of information the world has ever known to anybody who's got a cell phone or a laptop. These models in some way is, people are calling software 2.0 or internet 2.0 with all kinds of words for it, but I think it's very similar. I think it's a new form of interacting with technology that we've never had before.
Yep.
And enabling that access in places where it typically access has been harder to adopt new technology, I think is something which is really exciting. I don't really know where it's going to go, but I think it's a really exciting prospect.
You look at what's going on in the world at the moment, in some places that are getting internet blocked and communication blocked and all that. So this could be a real revolution. Amazing. And you've mapped out an evolution from naked LLM calls, agentic workflows, tool calling, MCP servers, and now agent skills. For leaders who aren't deep in the technical weeds, what problem does each step in that chain actually solve?
This is the place I'm maybe most excited, which is the abstractions on top of these language models are starting to become more and more accessible, and they're enabling things like statefulness across these systems, which is going to be really powerful. So when these models first came out, talking to T2 and then the early BERTs and stuff, you'd have an endpoint, or you'd use a Hugging Face Transformers library, and you'd host an endpoint yourself, and you could ask questions of these models and you'd get back a string of text, and you'd have to scaffold everything around that to be useful. It became a call and a for loop or a while loop within a program where you batched up requests and took those downstream to do other things. And then we started building these frameworks around them for these agentic approaches, multi-agentic approaches, and they became implicitly part of a chain that ideally delivers some value. But what it did is it abstracted away a lot of the engineering that's required to bring your own tools just to solve what should be accessible problems for these models. And that was quite an exciting first step. I don't think it really saw a lot of adoption at that point because the abstraction wasn't quite powerful enough. I think tool calling was the next step in there, which OpenAI brought to us. I think has been kind of like a seminal part of the improvement of the application layer of these language models, where now instead of having to rely purely on the context given to the model at the time of prompting and time of inference, you can now enable these models to contextually understand what might need to happen and to use a tool which is more deterministic, like some Python script or some shell script, whatever, to retrieve information, to perform a computation, and then bring that back into context. That has underpinned a lot of the improvements that we've seen in these AI tools. So Claude Code and stuff uses a lot of tool calling, whether it's to access local files, to search the internet, to add context in that way, or even in financial services where we do a lot of work, you are seeing people encode business logic in Python, expose it as a tool that an LLM can call, and then this conversational way ask about things like underwriting assessments or premium pricing or like risk aversion calculations, and asking a language model to run it for them, but not ask the model to do the math, ask the model to go off and ask a calculator, and the calculator returns the answer. That, I think, laid the basis for, hey, we can have these models interact with the environment around us agentically. And that was where MCP came in. So Anthropic's open protocol on this, which also added statefulness. So now you could have these servers that could run things, but could also store data and context. And now you weren't just having these models that when the context got full, you had to turn the model off, turn it back on again. It also added a level of persistence around them. So you could retain customer sessions across time using some kind of MCP server. You could add content from CRMs and that kind of stuff through endpoint calls through MCP servers. This added a more traditional software engineering approach as well, where you could just treat like endpoints for AI. And now we're seeing skills. A couple of weeks ago, Claude creates skills.md, the new way of instructing language model. And it's taken the barrier of entry from at the beginning with LLMs and being purely geared towards engineers to anyone can now contextually and just in time instruct these models to do something specific. So you can describe a job, save it in a markdown file with a very simple header that's very low token count, with a lot of context underneath for how you solve a problem, how you think about solving a problem, how you validate a problem, analogies for the problem so it can think about it in other ways, even how to load tools to help solve it. And then when the model realizes, hey, the job I'm performing looks like this QA skill that I've been taught how to do, it can automatically load it. But the barrier to entry to being able to do this is you can type and you know the job that you want to do, which is crazy cool for anyone who's not super technical on the engineering side of the thing, on the engineering side of the spectrum. You've got AI art directors. AI art director might be a job of the future where they can include everything they want to do as these skill personas. And then the model can just run off and do these things as if they had a whole team. Or like a financier can now encode specific parts of a task they want to do into these skills just in markdown, just in plain text. And then the model will contextually understand and load these objectives into context, run off and complete them. And that's the exciting part for me, is the democratization of utilization of these models has become so accessible. Anyone can get meaningful outputs from them pretty quickly.
Oh, it's crazy. Really crazy. I've been playing about with some basic stuff myself, but just some of the outputs I'm getting is like unreal. Actually, what it knows about me as well, I think I'm a bit of a compulsive sharer, so I've probably been telling it too much over 25, but it's perfect what these models are giving me back, and probably helping me with a lot of stuff as well, which is crazy.
Like Gemini, ChatGPT, Anthropic, whatever, or Claude, like they have persistent memory. So they're like remembering stuff across chat. And that's an example of this sort of statefulness.
That's what I was going to say. I actually wrote that down. When you mentioned the word statefulness, can explain that to a completely non-techie person that doesn't know anything about technology and AI.
Imagine you're a goldfish.
Yeah.
Right? And you swim around your bowl and you get back to the front and you think, hey, there's some food here. You swim around the bowl again, you get back to the front, you think, hey, there's some food here. And every time it's like a new input.
Yeah.
Statefulness is a dolphin.
Yeah.
And it swims around the ocean, but it remembers where it put that rock.
Yeah.
And it can go back to that rock and it can play with it or whatever. For penguins or whatever dolphins do with rocks.
Yeah.
But it's that ability to have persistence in the world and to be able to personify it, to remember something about an event, a user, a chat, a work stream, and be able to have that be available and impactful every time it has to perform an operation. So statelessness is really good too. In certain conditions, it's really useful. Statefulness is really useful in many conditions. But when you want that like persistence of dialogue, when you want like customer history to be a thing, you want statefulness because you want to be able to load it into memory.
We've done some work with a startup, like a venture studio back startup based in London. And then that's it. It's creating memory. It's like just a Memco, they're called. Just all their agents are just creating memory, which is fascinating. Really is. It's exciting times. And I suppose statefulness is probably different from having a will as well. I spoke to someone before and they say that we're in trouble. Statefulness might be okay, but when the agents start getting their own will, that's when the world's in trouble. I think we're far from there.
Yeah, we're very far from there. They're will-less. And they're also, talking about things like statefulness and memory kind of also reminds us that like under the hood, they are actually just like fancy autocomplete still. Like they're just statistical models. They don't understand anything outside of understand is even personifying it. They can't perform inference on anything that they can't fit into their parametric world. They don't remember anything. They're not alive. Even as much as they might sound like it when you talk to them for hours a day. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. And what changes when we move from calling a model to orchestrating an agent that can interact with its environment?
This is where things get useful. Back in 2019, 2020, we were using transform-based models to do pre-processing on text data for stuff like recommendations. You could take descriptions of products and you could find out how similar textual descriptions were or reviews, by pre-processing the sentences as paragraphs with these models and then just doing math over the embeddings that come out. That's calling the model. That's using it for a specific job to get a specific output. Probably do it with other things too. I think with this orchestration environment interaction that we're seeing, I think this is what stops them being borrowed from Anthropic here on their terminology. Like I think this is what changes them from being tools to being closer to coworkers. So I think when you're able to quite dynamically prescribe autonomy to these models to be able to do things, that's when we're seeing them feel like more than models. And so when you're talking to your Gemini and you say, hey, can you look this thing up for me? You're not calling the model. It's giving you an answer out of memory. It's searching the internet. It's checking your chat history. And the answer that comes back is is now more contextually aware of the time and the place and your history and what's relevant on the internet, then that's usually going to be a better answer than what comes out of some data set that stopped being collected in 2023.
Definitely.
I think that's a small example of this. And then it gets larger and larger when you enable it to start doing things like, we're doing a lot of work with AI and CRMs. That's how you do relationship management with AI. And being able to push and pull information out of CRMs and then being able to action stuff off the back of that for follow-ups and for reminders to individuals is very powerful. And that's not just, it's beyond good software engineering. It's giving you something else to help you do your job better.
So it's starting to feel more like actually onboarding a coworker rather than software integration then? Do you think it's at that point?
I think that's a fair way to put it. I know McKinsey CEO was recently in Congress or something saying they have 65,000 employees and 25,000 of them are agents. That feels like a bit of a stretch.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I do think that this is enabling a grassroots, bottom-up utilization of AI that's actually the force multiplier on industries that we want to be seeing, rather than maybe like a top-down thing, like everyone gets Copilot. Now it's like everyone can have their own Copilot. I think there's a semantic difference in that sense that's important.
No, definitely. And you've called out like MCP and ACP as particularly significant. What makes these protocols, which most leaders have never heard of, so important for enterprise scale?
Yes, so they're both open source protocols, so anyone can use them. It's a good start. But MCP allows these models to interact with code or data or the environment through endpoints. So it's fairly deterministic. If you call the endpoint with the same input, you should get the same output. And that's allowing a lot of this interaction with CRMs, ERPs, CMSs, DRMs, DAMs, whatever system you're pushing and pulling data from. It's allowing these language models to get business information, customer data into context and be able to then perform more operations on it. And it's allowing agents to communicate with themselves. So now we're talking about this future state where individuals aren't interacting with agents necessarily, but like an individual's agent might be interacting with a business's agent. And a lot of things are going to be able to be automated in a way that we haven't been able to see before. We're seeing it in retail already. So we see OpenAI did integrations with a couple of major retailers in the US and the UK to be able to do like agentic shopping online. The other day, Google released UCP, I think it's called Universal Consumer Protocol or something. And it's another step in this direction where it's trying to enable one system to talk to another system and be able to make decisions for the end users on both sides. And this is it's a wild and wacky future where we're heading to where the whole internet might just be individuals' agents interacting with businesses' agents. And I don't know where this goes exactly, but there's a lot of applications that are unlocked by this ability for automata to interact with other automata. And it's a really cool area. It's really poorly defined, I think, right now, but we're seeing the building blocks we put together. And now it's down to like creativity and business value drivers and senior leaders to figure out what the strategic direction is for a business or for a product or for a brand to be able to use this, how it enables them to grow, how it saves them costs, what their infrastructure and enterprise needs to look like to be able to adopt to it. Because I think we haven't seen the decline of search. Like that was overblown. Google's doing just fine, but I think we will see more and more responsibilities on an individual level be handed off to agents in one form or another. And these protocols help them represent people and intents and enable them to act on behalf of people. The very easiest thing to talk about is like shopping, but there's going to be so many more applications.
Excellent. Is a large part of your work at the moment in advising business leaders within organizations about this?
Yeah, a large part of what I'm doing right now is the strategy behind how businesses think about installing these principles from the ground up. Here means from the data up, right? So what does data for AI look like? What does AI for a consumer look like? How do you string those things together? How do you get your business ready for exposing their agents, their endpoints to these consumer-facing ones? A lot of what we're doing right now is the strategy behind or illuminating the value drivers behind AI and then how to get ready for it, mapping the as is, trying to figure out what the to-be needs to be, pointing businesses in the right direction to be able to undergo that work for themselves or with assistance in order to meet those end goals of being an agentic commerce partner, being an agentic bank, being an agentic insurer.
No, brilliant. Perfect. Excellent. And the concept of agent skills is relatively new. What are they, and why do you see them as a step change in how we instruct AI systems?
That's this last layer of abstraction, right?
Yeah.
This is the enabler for laymen to be able to expertly prompt systems.
Yep.
So they are very new as of just a couple of weeks ago. They are encoded instruction sets and context and tools to be able to solve problems as close to deterministically as possible, but repeatably, I think is really the key word there. And I think they're a big step change because they allow a much broader base of people to engage meaningfully in like a real value driving way with these models. So Claude Code is famous for creating them, and I think now Claude Code is starting to be poorly named, especially with the introduction of co-work the other day, which is funny enough entirely written by Claude Code tools. And it allows you to save workflows as skills. So if you do something on your desktop every day, or something with your email or local file servers, or with notes on how you do follow-ups, you can now manageably and tractably store those instruction sets as these markdown files and enable you to reproducibly kick off that workflow for yourself every day. So whether that's taking notes, synthesizing them, writing next steps, and reminding yourself to follow up with those clients via email in half an hour, then you can now do all these things in these command line tools. And I think it's really exciting that we're really enabling more and more people to gain value from these language models without having to be engineers or system architects or MLEs and that kind of thing.
Yeah. When you're talking there, I'm just thinking about people just actually managing their whole life with this. It makes me laugh. Sometimes it's funny how you could get so caught up in it as well. Because I can imagine, just kind of jumping off script a little bit here, but I can imagine just listening to you, and you must be reading stuff every single day and keeping in touch with stuff and like new papers, new releases. It's a lot of work. No, fair play. Amazing.
It's dense. It's dense right now. There's a couple of key areas you have to stay on top of. There's product releases from businesses, so what they're putting out that's going to be saleable to consumers or enterprises. And I think that gives you the feel for what's needed, what's wanted right now. And then you've got maybe like your Hacker News page or your AI writ large Reddit subreddits, where you've got people talking about projects that they're working on and cool startups that people are engaging with. And I think that's giving you this flavor for what's coming in the next 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. And then you've got the deluge of academic papers coming out about how these models are being improved from the inside. And this is giving you a view for what might be possible sort of beyond that 12 months mark. So 1 year, 18 months, 2 years. And trying to stay on top of all of that is, it's like a half-time job in itself. You check all your sites, you check all your paper submissions, like your RSVs, try and read as much as you can. It's too much for anyone. But if you can figure out the stuff that you care about, it's possible to mostly stay afloat. But there's a lot right now.
And you've got a toddler running about as well, looking for your attention when you're at home as well.
Yeah, that's the other half-time job. And then I've got my day job.
Non-stop. You need to be wired a certain way for this, and you obviously love what you do, but you're top of your game as well. And anybody at top of their games, it's got to be, so fair play. And you've talked about skills reducing cognitive load, cutting token consumption, and solving context filing problems. Can you walk through how they actually work in practice?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of important parts in this. Reducing cognitive load. So the narrowing of the instruction set and the context that's required for these language models to do a thing is what I mean by that. And instead of having to remember to ask a model to do something, you can create these suggestions and it will automatically pick them up and rerun them. So if you do the thing once, in theory, you've now done it many times. So you don't have to think about it again and again. So whether it's part of a QA workflow or something, it's not something that should just be taken care of for you. And the token consumption part is useful from a cost perspective and from an inference efficiency perspective. That sort of leads into what it actually looks like in practice. There's just these markdown files, which is just a standard of text formatting. And you have a header at it, and the header describes what everything below the header will be about. But now when we first started messing around with tools and tool calling and MCP servers, the way that works is you have to load. So when I say context, you can think of context, in case for anyone who's unfamiliar, as like the total addressable world of these language models. So there's these models released, and there's usually a bit of fanfare about, this one has the biggest context window, has the most information that you can ask it to look at. The Google models are pretty good. They've got like 1 million token context window, which is something like the entire Harry Potter series 5 times over or something like that. You can just jam so much information in there. Whether that's useful or not is a different conversation. It's how much is available. Smaller models often have smaller context windows, and not every model has emphasized how much information you can put into the language model at one time. And you'll find you run into constraints. So you can ask it too many questions, and the underlying math, the underlying physics behind these models eventually just says, no, thank you, I can't do that math. And that's your context window. Don't have to worry about how that actually gets computed. When you had to deal with MCP servers and tool calling and stuff, not when you do deal with them. The descriptions of all those tools get loaded into context and inference. So if you've got like a 200,000 token context window, you might use 10,000 tokens just saying what tools you have available to do stuff, plus a system prompt, plus a user prompt. Now you're like 15,000 tokens or something. And that fills up pretty fast. So now you're just working with less and less available time before you have to start dumping context, or you have to turn it off and turn it back on again, so to speak. When you do that, these models often just forget what they've learned in the last session, personifying with the word learn, but they forget where they've been told explicitly something was good or bad, how to treat kinds of data, how to process things, tone, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So you don't really want to be running out of your context window that much. You want anything you want, you also want to be pretty early in your context window.
Yeah.
And what these skills that you do is load like 50 tokens that say the thing below, but I don't want you to load into memory just yet, does X. And the model will read those 50 tokens and it'll say, that looks like what I need to be doing right now. I'll load the next 500, but only just in time for the operation, not every single time at inference. So this is making it a more dynamic system. You can work with them for longer before they start to forget. And that's really useful now when these context windows are a constraint, and they are something that you have to engineer around. They are something you have to work around. Might not be a constraint in the future, but for now, it's a real improvement in the efficiency of your context window and how much you can do before you can't do it more.
We've had some good feedback from the podcast, from leaders and people, board members who are listening and getting some good value from it as well and enjoying the content. So for CEOs and boards listening, if capability is plateauing, but consistency and abstraction are advancing, what should that change about how they evaluate AI investment?
I'm going to repeat myself slightly here, I think, but I think we've hit a point, where the optimism around AGI is meeting the cold water of reality. Yep. We're not going to get there tomorrow or next year. We're getting to very intelligent, very capable models, but the performance of them is good enough. Mm-hmm. And I think it's time to be focusing entirely on the application layer of what these new shovels let us build. It's a really good time to invest in systems to reduce operational complexity, to enable new growth. These models are capable of these things with the right teams, the right operating models, the right installations of new AI SaaS products, etc. It's not a waiting game anymore for investment. We're not going to see the answer to every single problem next year solved magically by some new supermodel. We're going to see lots of valuable problems solved by intelligent applications built on top of the highly capable models we already have.
Yeah.
So we've seen a tremendous amount of investment over the past year or two across silicon and training and energy and teams to build out these things. And now I think we're coming to a point where we need to be recontextualizing things like AI strategies and AI investments as business strategies and business investments with the lens of AI. Yeah. What is the problem our business is trying to solve? Can we solve it better with AI? And figuring out what the solution for today is, not waiting for tomorrow's solution to every single problem that we have.
Brilliant, great answer. Your data analytics, AI and technology leaders, how does their role evolve when the technical barriers to AI deployment keep falling?
I don't remember who made this analogy first, but I really like it.
Yeah.
Code is becoming cheap, but software is still expensive.
Yeah.
And we used to live in a time when printing press, right, where people trained their whole lives at scribing. And I think that's what software engineers look like today. They are artisans of code. And these tools are enabling people to print code at a rate we've never seen before. But it's not always software that comes out the back. Sometimes it's just good enough. And I think that for anyone who's working in data and analytics, who's making decisions about products, team shapes, compositions, that kind of stuff today, I think that we should be looking at how you blend engineering skills, software development skills with subject matter experts in a new way. Because I think what we've enabled is, as SMEs, to be able to write functioning code, not necessarily functioning software.
Yeah.
And how you blend teams of those artisans with people who can use a printing press,
Yep.
I think is going to be a really exciting area. There's a story from LinkedIn the other day of some startup where they had a conversation with their CRM team, and there's their CRM provider, and the CRM provider was having a rate hike
Yeah.
on their subscription for the year. And the CTO messaged an engineer and said, "Can't we just build this?" And they hooked up Claude Code to the company credit card and built a functioning CRM in 3 days. I'm not saying go and replace Salesforce with the vibe coded solution, but I think if we're in a space where we can get the people who feel a problem and able to build a solution and build it hand in hand with teams who are expert at building software solutions, we should be thinking about talent and hiring strategies and team compositions in the lens of the expertise we've built and the new tooling that we have to enable them to do things at greater pace and at greater scale.
Yeah, great answer on both those questions. Really good. Real value there. And where will organisations really separate themselves in the next 12 to 24 months? Is it model selection, orchestration design, something else entirely?
Something else entirely. I think model selection is going to become largely irrelevant. I think we've got lots of projects where you've got like dynamic routing of models through model gateways to be able to select the most appropriate model for specific things. This is abstracting all models to a single API and then allowing something else to choose the best one. I think orchestration design is going to be in many ways commoditized as well, or at least going to unify on a particular shape or pattern that's understood in the industry. I think the thing that's going to diversify organizations, that's going to help them separate themselves from the pack for the next year or two, is going to be the clarity of focus on how AI improves their business, not how AI can be implemented purely for equity increasing decisions or marketing or advertising or through FOMO. I think it's a major driver in decisions to implement AI right now. And I think that the real value from AI is going to be where AI will enable someone to solve a problem which was previously totally intractable, but which is paramount to the value of the business. And in either reducing costs drastically or enabling growth, which is previously inaccessible. I think that key focus, not on AI for AI's sake, but my business model, my market, my customer base, what do they want, what do they need? How do I serve that better with AI? Not just how do I get AI because everyone else doesn't it. I still think it's the same mindset from the last year, but I think now we're at a place where someone's going to get this thing right, whatever it is, whatever market you're in, whatever your customer base looks like, and they're going to just geometrically escape the rest of it.
Brilliant. Really good. And if there's one mistake organisations repeatedly make when navigating this evolution, what is it?
It's the governance and evaluation layer on top of these models still. This isn't just concerning for financial services or for public sector work or for healthcare. They are fundamentally black boxes. There was a point in time where we could ask models why they made decisions, and we could understand through weights and the feature engineering what was important to a decision. We've gone past that point, and we may never know precisely why these black boxes decide to say what they say, but we need to have traceability around queries and who's asking what questions and what downstream effects they're having where they meet distribution points for advertising or for decision making. If it's being used for credit decisions or grading, at least being able to log it, at least being able to have visibility over and then tracing over what calls are made, where it's impacted people, who owned the data that made those references, they made those queries, that kind of stuff. It's evaluations on when models are changed, when data is changed. We used to worry all the time about data drift and model drift, and I think we would hear less of that in the conversation, partially because we don't understand how to measure those two things in the context of AI and LLMs. We need to have people who understand what good and what bad looks like for these production systems, still making the evaluation frameworks for these systems. That shouldn't change. But I feel like in the ambiguity of what AI in production can sometimes look like, that's the thing that's forgotten because it's very hard, but it absolutely needs to be done correctly.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much. We're coming to the end. But if you had to leave leaders with one principle for navigating AI, what would it be?
I think we're in an era, we're in a really exciting time period where your advantage isn't going to come from chasing capability, or closing a capability gap, or being at the cutting edge of technology. It's going to be from being consistent and reliable and exploitative in the use of AI for your specific market, for your specific product, for your specific niche.
Yeah.
It's blending AI with business models, not deploying AI simply for the sake of deploying AI. It's making sure that your business strategy includes it,
Yeah.
but it is not steered by it. That's the principle. This is a new lever in market economics.
Yeah.
Applying it correctly to your business, not simply applying it, has to be the forefront of how you're making strategic decisions, directional decisions for your business over the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years.
Yep. Really enjoyed that. Some of the stuff you were talking about there. I'm really looking forward to getting this one shared with the community and all the listeners. So brilliant. And just again, if anybody wants to find you, where's the best place to find you these days?
You can find me at Vector8. We have a website. If we can share that link, and I'm also on LinkedIn at Richard Bownes. If you want to reach out to me for anything that I'm talking about, anything that my team could help with, please find us there. Always happy to just have a conversation too. Organize a Teams call, a coffee, Skype, whatever your preference is these days. I'm always happy to take time to talk to interesting people about interesting problems.
Nah, brilliant. And I'll catch up with you soon, but thanks very much, Richard. Really appreciate that. Brilliant. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to A Class Act. If you've enjoyed the episode, make sure to follow the show so you never miss a conversation. And if you're building a data team or making a key leadership hire, reach out to us at MBN Solution using the link in the show notes.